Good morning, Red Day classes. This is the first time I've ever done this, so if it's not so good, I'm sorry. I'm currently in my basement because we have a snow day. But instead of losing an entire day, we need to move on because the way the final schedules is and the upcoming winter break, we really don't have the time to waste. So, we've already lost last Friday. We're not going to lose today. So, open up your book. Hopefully, you have your book to page 242. If you don't have your book, I'm going to try to find an online version that you can just look at. I'm going to hold the book up so you can see what I'm looking at. But at 242, the book doesn't have very much to go till the end of the chapter, so don't sweat it. All right, if you don't have your book, still follow along and just pay attention. The book starts talking about learning by observation. By observation, we're talking about what we see, right? When we think back to our Piaget and our Erikson papers, most of what you learned about the world, you learned from interacting with other people, learned from watching your parents do it, looked at stuff on TV, you mimicked, right? It was like the monkey see, monkey do type of thing. So, the book starts off about observational learning, and it's defined as learning by observing others, also called social learning. It's also called the social learning theory, that we learn how to do everything in life, whether it be how to behave, how to stand in line when we're at the store or we're waiting for something, how to drive, how to do pretty much everything. We learn by watching other people. Um, if you think back to your own life, it's, let's say, um, hmm, how do you use a fork? How did you learn how to use a fork? You probably watched your parents, caregiver, scoop up the food and put it in your mouth, right? You learned that it was like kind of a little shovel to put food in your mouth. You didn't know the word shovel, but you knew what it did. So as you progressed and got a little bit more fine motor control, you learned to scoop food and then feed yourself. Now, we observe all different types of behavior. We observe simple rudimentary things like how to feed ourselves. We learn how to play a sport. We learn how to drive. And before we go, well, Mr. Krause, I took driver's ed and I did not learn how to drive by watching anybody. I could not learn how to drive from watching a YouTube video. The majority of you all, probably at some point in your life, probably when you were younger, when you were in a certain stage of development that's very fixated on the rules, probably observed your parents driving along the highway and going, hey, mom, you're going over the speed limit. That's illegal. You're breaking the law. Um, we all done it. Mom, you didn't learn to use a turn signal when you changed lanes back there. Um, it seems petty. It really does. But when we observe people around us doing the same things, following the same rules, we learn the rules. And when we learn the rules, we learn what not to do and what to do. And that's when we learn how to do things and how to do them correctly according to society. Now, is observational learning, it could be a positive thing like learning how to feed yourself or drive a car, or it could be negative behavior, antisocial behavior. We're going to talk about that a little bit later, though. How you do this is, well, through the book calls it modeling. This is the monkey see, monkey do type thing. Sorry if the camera's bouncing. I'm sitting on actually a bed down here. This is like our guest room. The process of observing and imitating a specific behavior. Monkey see, monkey do. We can all think back to a time when we saw a kid acting. It might even be you. Do something that totally reminds you of something that your parents do or your parents say, and it might cause you a little bit of discomfort, and you'd be like, I'm turning it to my parents. No, it is okay. You've learned how to cope with certain things, with certain coping skills. Certain situations, you might act just like your parents because you saw that's how they handled those situations. That's called modeling. It's called teaching. With if we look at teachers themselves, right? Um, Teachers come in all shapes and sizes, abilities, in disabilities, inabilities, whatever. But they're more than just conveying knowledge. They're modeling behaviors. They're modeling thinking, and they're modeling work ethic. We're just Teachers are more than just dispensers of information. We're actually modeling a heck of a lot more behavior than just, hey, learn this vocabulary. Um, so that's modeling. It's not that difficult, right? Mirrors in the brain. It's then, and there's a picture in here of a child spanking a doll. You all see that? That's awkward, me looking over the top like that. But kids, you can sometimes see your children, my children, actually, Anastasia did this once or twice, put toys in timeout, right? This child's wailing on this dolly after pulling down its pants. That's not so healthy modeling. So, all right. Actually, let me talk a little bit more about modeling. And you're like, oh, come on, Carlos, get through it. We see behavior modeled all the time, and we are very social creatures. We'll learn through observation, learn through modeling, and then we'll actually adapt to the situation. I talk about the Buchel example, right? If we took one of you out of my class and then put you in a Buchel classroom, your behavior would change. It might not change to the extreme that they demonstrate, but it would deviate from where it is currently now. If we took a kid out of Buchel and then we put him right into my classroom, his behavior is going to deviate from his norm or her norm because of the situation. They're going to observe a different way of dealing things. They're going to be modeled a different way of conduct and dealing with it in the classroom. And they're going to learn a new set of social expectations and ways of doing things. So, are all those kids who are quote unquote in a bad school like Buchel bad? Or they're a product of their environment and their social situation? Yeah, we don't really have an answer or a good answer at that. Mirrors in the brain, moving on. Mirrors in the brain. I beat this to death earlier in the neurology unit. Mirror neurons, right? These part of our brains that really light up and they give us our sense of empathy, right? That allow us to see something and to experience it as ourselves. Why we are attracted to, let's say, romantic comedies, right? It's like, oh, they're being treated so sweetly and they love each other, and it makes my brain light up like I was that person. Action movies, the same way. It's the sense of excitement and adrenaline, the explosions and the car chases and everything else. Our brains go through a little bit of that too. Drama, being on the edge of your seat, the anxiety. There's no logical reason why you should be suffering anxiety because of some moving screens on the TV. It's because of our mirror neurons. It allows us to see somebody experiencing a sensation or an emotion and to empathize and to actually experience it along with them. We've seen somebody crying, upset because of some sort of loss or some sort of event. And when somebody can go over to and start comforting the individual, and the individual who's trying to do the comforting will start crying as well. It's very, very common. These are your mirror neurons in play, right? Uh, when in Guys, mirror neurons, we're just starting to understand them. I mean, according to the book, they were pretty much discovered in 1991. 1991, that's not terribly too long ago. So in 1991, we have, what, 22 years of experience with this phenomenon. And we're understanding more and more. It goes to fear, it goes to emotion. Think about like a sports, like the Super Bowl or something, right? Your team is in the Super Bowl or the World Series or whatever it may be, the World Cup, and all of a sudden, your team scores. What do? You're pumped. You jump out of your off your couch and you're yelling at the TV and you're feeling this sense of elation. Why? Did you gain anything? Did you win anything from the sporting event? No. The point is that when you see someone succeed on TV that you associate with, your neurons, mirror neurons, light up. Your brain lights up the same way. The same pleasure senses, the same sensations, as if you were actually experiencing it yourself. Um, so mirror neurons. I've gone over that before. It explains the popularity of a lot of different things, a lot of different mediums, a lot of different branches of entertainment. Some unsavory, some rated G. Everything, a lot of things can be related to mirror neurons. So, okay. Next page. 244, we're going to talk about Bandura. Bandura and his Bobo doll. Sounds weird, I know. So just bear with it, right? Oh, hold on. I forgot. I'm going to intersperse YouTube videos into this, and I totally forgot. But going back to modeling, right? Modeling behavior. It is funny. Whenever I teach this, I always think back to this anti-drug ad that used to be on the TV. And I guessed it was from 1995 in front of the class, and I finally looked it up, and it was from 1987. Yeah, I felt old. But I'll put a link to the ad where social and maladjust behavior was modeled for by a father to a son, and the son picked up on this anti-social behavior through observational learning. I'll just put it to you that way. It's pretty entertaining, but I learned it from watching you, Dad. I learned it from watching you. Bandura, Bobo doll, weird. Bobo, if you don't know, was a clown, right? Bobo the clown. And there used to be these inflatable like dolls that you used to be able to buy at, a toy store, and it would be like this inflatable thing that was about 3.5 feet tall. And at the bottom, it would have either a weighted disc or you would put sand into the bottom, and you'd be able to like bop it and punch it and knock it over, and it was like a weeble wobble, and it would just go right back up. Now, Bandura wanted to test something, whether he could, through observational learning, teach kids to be violent and how to deal with frustration. And what he did was he had an adult go into a room with a child, and there was tons of toys in the room, right? And they were both playing with the toys, and they were awesome toys. And the adult had to leave, and the adult was angry and frustrated, and just walks over and starts walloping on this Bobo doll. There's some great footage because this was done like in the 60s, actually in the 60s. Great footage stills from the book, like on the top there, right there, that top picture. It's a woman drop kicking the Bobo doll across the room, woman punching it, getting on top of it and pounding its face, and right below is the learned behavior. That picture right there, to the second one down to your left, that's a kid smacking a Bobo doll in the head with a mallet. Pretty extreme stuff. So, what Bandura's experiments really showed was, could violence be learned? Could you model violent behavior as a learned response? Now, with Bandura, the situation was very specific. It was isolation from a toy, and then access to the means of getting out your frustration and actually being allowed to and encouraged to. Now, with Bandura, the children were left in that room with the awesome toys and they were playing with them, right? Then they were removed and they were told that they could no longer play with the toys because they had to be saved for other children. They're brought to another room that has like literally bad toys, like parts of toys just laying around. Nothing fun at all. The child is frustrated and angry for being taken away from the positive stimulus, the toys, and so they actually in the corner of this room is another Bobo doll. The child invariably goes over it and starts beating the living daylights out of it. And what we can garner from this is that why Bandura's experiments were so interesting at the time and still important to us today is because we can see that it doesn't take, with these young children, it doesn't take very much modeling to have them socially learn this socially maladjust behavior. It doesn't take a ton of input to get them to be violent. This is both scary in a way, but also kind of true in a way. So if we turn a page, applications of observed learning, there's the pro-social, the positive, helpful types of social modeling. And it's like, let's see, to encourage children to read to them. And surround them with books and people who read, to increase the odds that your children will practice your religion, worship and attend religious activities with them. Basically, be a good person, and then your children hopefully will be good people too. There's a lot riding on that. I mean, but if the modeling is consistent and within the home, then the message is consistent, the message is clear, and the expectation is clear for the child. And the child invariably becomes a good person, right? Now, there's a nasty dark side to this as well. If we look to the other page, it's antisocial effects. The antisocial effects of modeling behavior, poor modeling behavior, you see it invariably in behavior at grocery stores, right? We've all seen some parent lose their cool on a kid in a grocery store, and you go, was that proportional? Was that just? Is it my position to step in? I don't even know. And that's a really gray line. It's a fine line for a lot of people, and it's a personal choice. I mean, there isn't a fine line between, like, reprimand and abuse, but we've all seen things that are kind of sketchy and kind of questionable out there in public. With antisocial effects, there is a correlation between children who have been raised around domestic violence or in a violent environment, whether it be a lawless, war-torn zone, a area where domestic violence is super prevalent, or in a situation where there's neglect going on within the house. If those things happen, the child has a higher degree of tendency to exhibit violent behavior later in life. AKA, the kid who gets abused becomes the abuser, or can become the abuser. And I've talked about this before in class. It's not a P implies Q logic puzzle. It is not deterministic. It is not a sentence that you will become a certain way. It is you have a predisposition to becoming a certain way. You don't have to, because you can change if you're aware of how you're being conditioned. You can either engage in it and allow it to be reinforced within you, or to actually dismiss it and allow its really effectiveness on you as a person and how you deal with things to be quite limited. Now, those antisocial effects of like violence within the home, violence within the community, violence within the society. Um, Going back just a week ago, Alexander being choked by that kid in CEP before elementary school. Where did a child learn that when they're upset or frustrated, that's okay to choke somebody? Another kid in his class actually has taken to, and this has happened a few times, punching the teacher, biting kids, and even punching and kicking the principal, who had to pick up the child and remove him forcefully. This is a kindergartner. Where did this child learn this behavior? Think back to when I pulled Alexander out of JCPS preschool. When the other kids, when they get frustrated and get separated from each other, they start doing this towards each other. Where did they learn it? Whether it's the home, that violence was demonstrated on TV, in the community. The kids aren't given a really good toolbox to work with as far as being able to express their emotions and engage in a positive way rather than a negative way. These antisocial effects are quite huge, and they're very pervasive within society. There's more awareness of domestic violence than even when I was a kid. Um, it's kind of interesting because researching this and wanting to include newer stuff. Um, Patrick Stewart, the Shakespearean actor, and Jean-Luc Picard from Star Trek and not Enterprise, Next Generation. He has come out in the last few years as a very big proponent of domestic abuse awareness because he was a victim himself, and in really watching this video, I'll put a link to. It really rang true in my own experience. The type of, a lot of people know what's going on, but no one actually says anything. And it is this really shameful thing that nobody, even within the family, talked about. We still don't talk about it to this day. It's as if it never happened, because I guess we kind of wish it never did happen. Um, Quite honestly, I've never had a serious conversation with my parents about it, and it sounds like Patrick Stewart never did either. But he's at least doing something about it now, and he's using his fame to good use. Now, towards the bottom of 247, the book kind of goes in a weird direction, and let's pull it apart a little bit. Correlational studies, that should be the red flag right there. Correlational studies support the link between television and murder. In the United States and Canada, homicide rates doubled between 1957 and 1974, just when TV was introduced and spreading. Moreover, census regions with later dates for TV service also had homicide rates that jumped later. So there's this kind of correlational relationship between TV showing up and people murdering each other. It kind of looks convincing on the outside. There's a huge stuff going on within the United States and even Canada between 1957 and 1970. Was it 4? There's this thing called the Cold War that was really amping up. You had the Cuban Missile Crisis. You had the counterculture revolution. You had the civil rights movement. You had the women's rights movement. Society was in an uproar. In 1957, the future looked bright. We would all be living in space. Everything would be great and clean and new. By 1974, our vision of the future is what it is today. It's, zombie apocalypse and dystopic futures where everything isn't bright and shiny and great, and we're living on a moon or a planet or something like that, or in space. The future is terrible. Where did that change? It happened between 57 and 74. In 1957, you have the 57 Bel Air Chevy with the huge fins on the back of it, right? That was all a tip of the hat to the space race. The space was the future. It was a bright, shiny future. By 1974, a president had been impeached. Basically, there was this entrenched war that we couldn't get out of. People had no faith in the government, and at the same time, the constant threat of nuclear war was quite honestly waning on people. So was it TV that led people to start killing each other, or lack of a faith in a better future for tomorrow, for themselves and their children? I don't know. The more prevalent and socially accepted use of drugs? Maybe. In the economies that surround the distribution and use of drugs? Maybe. This is a correlational study. There's a lot of other things in play. But let's keep looking at the other two bullet points. White South Africans were first introduced to TV in 1975. A similar near doubling of the homicide rate began after 1975. There was also another thing going on in apartheid South Africa at the time. There was this whole group of people who wanted like their rights. Like a majority of South Africans, black South Africans, wanted their say and representation within government. And we're actually starting to fight back. So was it government? Was it internal strife and revolution? Or was it TV? I don't know. The third bump here, elementary school children with heavy exposure to media violence via TV, videos, and video games also tend to get into more fights. Did we hear the difference? Passive voice also tend to get. There's no deterministic. Tend or get into more fights. These kids aren't in elementary school aren't murdering each other. They tend to get into more fights. Does that sound very concrete, like science? It doesn't to me either. Now, as we learned from Unit 2, correlation does not imply causation. Exactly. In today's society, it's not just, we're not blaming TV for violence. In the 1950s, for immoral behavior, people were blaming comic books. And before that, they were blaming movies. And I'm not talking like shoot 'em up type of movies. I'm talking like people were holding hands in a scene. If you think back to old TV shows, remember like in a bedroom when it was a married couple, they had two separate beds? Did people actually live like that back then? No. Why did they have two separate beds? Because that's what was required of them by the moral code. Literally, there was a moral code TV shows and movies had to adhere to in order to actually get distribution. So when we think back to like I Love Lucy and stuff like that, and we think, oh, they had separate beds. Yeah, nobody had separate beds. It's two sets of laundry. Who wants to do that, really? But, okay. The big hotbed issue really today is video games. Do violent video games, cause kids to become more violent and like start murdering people? This really started coming about with the Columbine shooting. And just recently with the shooting in Connecticut, where people went, well, the kid did play violent video games. There must be a connection that made them more violent and make them come to the point where they actually commit murder. It's not like the kids of Columbine and Adam Lanza of Newtown, Connecticut, were just sitting around doing nothing and playing a video game and then said, you know what's a good idea? Murdering a bunch of people. I don't think it went down that way. I think there was a lot of contributing issues, but correlational studies, finding, how can I put this? Isolating the impact of certain elements on individuals is extremely difficult because we can't create laboratories, environments with people because there's just too much variation in upbringing and and genetics, and many different factors. We can't, you know, raise two adult humanoid twins from babies in isolation from one another with the same exact schooling and same exact interactions until they're adult, and then give them video games just to see if that makes them more prone to killing people. We can't do that. It's not morally ethical. But do some of these more violent tendencies come across from exposure? A couple stories. Um, Actually, this wrestling one of a kid wrestling mimicking a professional wrestler. That actually was. Sorry, I'm outing you here. One of the students actually talked about that in a Piaget paper, where he actually did this move, the rock bottom, on his little brother. It happened. I know people that I went to school with who did this to their small siblings. Um, when I was in elementary school, The Karate Kid came out, the movie, Ralph Macchio, and the whole crane kick at the end. Guess how many people got kicked in the face on the on the playground in elementary school? A lot of people. Why? Because they're all playing Karate Kid or Ninja Turtles and doing the crane kick, and it pop. Someone gets popped in the face. Everyone starts crying and running away. Kid has a bloody face, and we all kind of learn the lesson for a week until we start bloodying each other up in a week. Did it mean the Karate Kid was a bad movie? They made what, 3 sequels? But more to the point is that, did any of us know how to do a crane kick before watching a movie? No. And what did we do with that knowledge? We started assaulting each other on the playground. Good fun? I don't know. It's just an example. And there's nothing deterministic about it. Not every kid who watched the Karate Kid started beating each other up and doing a crane kick in each other's face. No. But with the knowledge came ability. Maybe that's the moral of it all. And that's where we're going to leave it. That's the end of the chapter. It's been 32 minutes. I hope this really comes out, because it's 32 minutes of my time. And I really hope the video doesn't have the delay it does with the audio when I'm actually watching it being filmed, because that's going to be really annoying. Okay. Vocab. Read 1 and 3. Tests on Thursday. Okay. Also, a few of you have asked me. White 4 final will be on next Thursday, and you will have first lunch. Okay. In Red 1 and Red 3, your final will be on next Friday, and that shouldn't be an issue. Red 1 and Red 3, yeah. That shouldn't be an issue as far as timing and stuff like that. So, anyway, everyone, I hope you have a wonderful snow day. Hopefully I'll have this posted before noon. I don't know how to do that. I've never done it before. But till then, see you tomorrow.